And I just want to see if I can find here what the priest said to. Well, let's read a little bit. 1 Samuel chapter 12. No, chapter 1, verse 12. And it says, it came to pass as she, Hannah, continued praying before the Lord, that Eli, the high priest, marked her out. Now Hannah, she spoke in her heart, and only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought she had been drunken. And Eli said unto her, he made this accusation, how long will you be drunken? Put away thy wine from thee. And Hannah answered and said, no, my Lord, I am a woman of a sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. Count not thine handmaid for a daughter of Belial, for out of the abundance of my complaint and grief have I spoken hitherto. Sounds like some of us, when we come to pray, it's out of the abundance of our complaint and grief do we pray. Then Eli answered and said, now this is what Eli, the corrupt priest, had just accused this woman being drunk in the temple, said, go in peace, and the God of Israel grant thee thy petition that thou hast asked of him. Get it here. That God can use and does use and will use and uses now men and women who are not perfect, who have problems, but God still uses them to speak His word to His people. I've often told people, and I'll tell you again today, and I'll probably tell you again in the future, if you're looking for the perfect church, keep looking, you ain't found it yet. Because this is not a perfect church. We're struggling like all other churches are to come into the presence of God and have a God encounter that will keep us going. If we don't have God encounters, we're going to quit. That's how important it is for every one of us as individuals to have our own God encounter so that we will not quit. When we grow tired and we're discouraged and depressed and worried about so many things, don't give in to those problems. Cry out to God for an encounter with Him. Say, God, speak to me, show me, open something to me. Don't let me give up. And God will come through with a God encounter for you. But it might not be out of the mouth of he you think it should be. Verse 18 says, and she said, that thine handmaid find grace in thy sight. So the woman went her way, and did eat, and her countenance was no more sad. God will take the sadness out of your life when you have a God encounter. And we all have sadness in us. Somewhere we have some sadness about something. We're sad because we're not rich. We're sad because we don't have a great house. We're sad because we don't drive a brand new truck. We're sad because We don't have all the things that we want. There's sadness in all of us. There's sadness in us because someone has died that we have loved. We're sad because our children won't have anything to do with us, or our grandchildren won't have anything to do with us. There are a lot of things that we have sadness in us about. And God comes along and He takes that sadness out of our life and gives us joy unspeakable and full of glory that becomes a God encounter that we can continue on our journey, that we can keep running this race. And though Hannah was struggling with all of her problems with being barren, and in those days, if a woman was barren, it was a shame. It was a disgrace. But through no problem, no reason other than the Word says that God shut up Hannah's womb. Tell you what, God has abilities we just don't want to give Him credit for. God shut up her womb for a purpose. And that purpose was so that that problem would drive her to have a one-on-one, face-to-face God encounter in spite of all the wickedness that was all around them. And I think it's time that you and I got to that place that says it doesn't make any difference of the sin that surrounds me. I'm going to have a God encounter. I'm going to have it right here in the midst of all this sin. If that were not possible, then God would call you to go join a nunnery or a monastery somewhere to have a God encounter. But He comes right where you are. He came right there into the temple that was so corrupt. It was so corrupt that the sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, had sexual relationships with the women who came to the temple. That's how corrupt it was. I'm thinking, wow. But in spite of all that, Hannah came to that temple and was dealt with by this corrupt high priest that couldn't even control his own house, his own sons. And God spoke to Hannah through the high priest and said, God, give you what you want. And so God dealt with her sadness, and that became a God encounter for Hannah. Verse 19. And they rose up in the morning early and worshiped before the Lord. It's talking about Hannah and Elkanah and the other wife and the other children. And they returned and came to their house to Ramah. And Elkanah knew his wife, and the Lord remembered her. Wherefore it came to pass, when the time was come, after Hannah had conceived, that she bore a son, and called his name Samuel, saying, because I have asked him of the Lord. Because she had a God encounter. And in that God encounter, she conceived a child. Because God came and intervened, and God, the same God that had closed her womb, now opened her womb, and she not only had Samuel, but she had several children after that to fill her house, to fill her God encounter. And the Word says that when Samuel was old enough, that his mother took him to that same corrupt high priest, that same corrupt temple, and said, here is the child that was lent to me, and I give him to you to raise him in this temple. And Samuel was raised under the shadow of this corrupt temple. He was raised in it, but he became a great man of God.